what is the history of tariffs in America? The media makes it seem as if we've never done this before. Have we financed our government with tariffs before? How did some of our founding fathers think about tariffs? And how does that connect to some of the news of President Trump using tariffs as a negotiating tool?
Right. For the first century and a half of our country, that's how the federal government raised its money. So a little background, industrial revolution in England, coal was what they burned, and they had coal mines that would fill up with water. So in 1769, Isaac Watt invented a steam pump to get water out of coal mines, and that quickly turned into a steam engine that ran factories. And wool, if you look at it under a microscope, it has little barbs that if you pull them, they hook together and get tighter. And so women would have to sit at a spinning wheel and take this yarn and turn it into thread and then make cloths. Well, factories could make bolts of cloth really quick, really inexpensive. And so this is called the Industrial Revolution. But the British did not allow manufacturing in the colonies because they wanted a market. And so when America becomes independent of Britain, the second bill that George Washington signed as president was the Tariff Act of 1789 to put a 5% tariff on all imports into America to make those factory-produced items from England more expensive intentionally, so that it would provide a cushion for those manufacturing to begin in America. Matter of fact, there was no income tax in America until the Civil War. I'll get to that. And the U.S. Constitution specifically mentions that tariff taxes was the way the federal government was going to get its income. Article 1, Section 8 authorizes the federal government to collect duties and imposts, which are different terms for tariffs, to pay the debts, provide for the common defense, and the general welfare of the United States. So basically, all federal money came from tariffs. And so Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, created the Coast Guard to do what? To catch ships that were trying to smuggle stuff into America without paying the tariffs. And so he's in charge of federal revenue. He's the Secretary of Treasury. The fastest ships of the day were called cutters. And so these were called revenue cutters. It was the beginning of the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard was started to collect tariffs. And so when the tariffs began to work, Thomas Jefferson, the third president, stated April 6, 1816, "It may be the duty of all to submit to this sacrifice to pay for a time and impost on importation of certain articles in order to encourage their manufacture at home." So it's like, look, everybody, we're going to have to pay a little bit extra if we want these foreign goods. Why? Because we want to create a margin so that people can take the risk and start factories in America. And this was amazing. Instead of women sitting at spinning yards, they could buy bolts of cloth. Instead of going to a well and dragging buckets of water into the house, they could have indoor plumbing. And then so basically the Industrial Revolution freed women up from these menial tasks. And then they produced farm equipment. And so instead of a farmer having to hire manual labor, one machine could harvest a field. Instead of ladies using wash tubs, they could use a washer machine. And so this saw the fastest rise in the standard of living in human history. And between 1792 and 1812, tariffs went up to 12.5%. After the War of 1812, tariffs went up to 25%. In 1820, they were at 40%, and near the Civil War, they were at 60%. Franklin Pierce, the 14th president, said December 5th, 1853, "Happily, I have no occasion to suggest any radical changes in the financial policy of the government. Ours is almost, if not absolutely, the solitary power of Christendom, having a surplus of revenue drawn immediately from imposts on commerce." Here's Franklin Pierce saying, hey, we're like the only country in the world, and we have a surplus of money, and it's all from tariff taxes.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.